So, hi friends. In this part of the video series, I'm going to cover the AWS Solution Architect real exam questions. So these are very much real exam questions, and you might see a lot of repetition when you try to appear for the exam. Uh, what you can also see is there will be similar or same questions in this exam. Uh, so whatever you see in these videos, please focus on the concepts. Even if there are few alterations to the questions, you will be able to answer the questions based on the concepts I am explaining in this video. Now, if you have seen my other videos like AZ900 or AWS Cloud Practitioner, you must have seen there is a pattern. What I do is I first give a lot of explanations for each and every option. So we first identify the problem statements. In the question, there is hardly one or two problem statements, and you have to focus on the keywords. The entire question is not important. That's the key. The second is you have to decode each and every option. Even if you are stuck, see, in the certification, many times it will happen. You will be in dilemma whether this option is right or that option is right. So you have to follow a technique to arrive at the right answer. So I'm going to share that in my videos, and then I cover the concepts for each option. What that means is, even if you have not studied that concept, even if you have not done any study, and if you are just going through these videos, this video will be uh, enough to explain you those concepts. So if I'm covering say 100 or 150 questions, and if each question has four options, I will be delving in depth on those concepts for those four options. So that way, uh, the coverage of the entire syllabus would be there through these questions. So I would request you to subscribe to my channel and like my videos. If this is really helping you, please like my videos. This motivates me to put in some more content. Now, in my earlier videos, there were parts where the voice probably was not clear, so I'm making sure that these videos have proper content and proper explanations with good sound. Please drop in your comments if you think there is something additional needed in these videos. So if you go through my videos, uh, the chances of clearing the exam is pretty high. I would request you to focus on the explanations I'm giving in these videos. You are not supposed to read any other content. If you cover these videos, these are self-sufficient to clear the exam. As a best practice, if you still want to have a read, better you go through the AWS documentation, which has the FAQs. Read the FAQs, it will give you a lot of clarity. Otherwise, I don't think there is any worth in going through Udemy or Simplilearn courses. That is just going to elongate your journey to get certified. Go through my videos, plan for a month, understand the concepts in depth, and appear for the exam. A month of preparation, a daily time limit of say 2 hours for a month is good enough to clear the certification. Let's quickly delve into the questions. I'm going with the first question. So this is the question, and I've also highlighted the answer for this. You can pause this piece of the video so that you can read it better. So this is a question related to DDoS attack. So you have a set of users via load balancer. It is accessing the EC2. You have your website on EC2. Now what is happening is you want to make sure that only legal, say suppose this user is legal, only this set of user can access the website. Others should not, because what are the other users doing? They are spawning multiple threads. They are changing their IP addresses. They are trying to bring your website down. At once, they will do, similar to stress testing. They will try to spawn so many threads that your infrastructure will go out of capacity and your website will go down. So how to prevent this? What should a solution architect recommend? The first option says deploy Amazon Inspector and associate it with ALB. So what is Inspector? So inspector will only inspect and tell you what is the problem. It will not prevent anything. What you want is a solution to prevent these attacks. What's the use if the attack happens? It says, hey, you know what? Two thieves came and they stole your jewelry. That is of no use. You want to protect you. The thief should not come in to your home and steal your stuff. So A is wrong. B says WAF. WAF is a firewall. So whenever you see DDoS in the exam, WAF is most likely the answer. That is the mantra. Now see network ACLs. This is used for whitelisting. You tell the network ACL that these are the set of IPs. You have to whitelist that only they can access. But this will not. This is not the right answer in this case, because network ACLs we never use for DDoS attacks. In DDoS attacks, what happens is the IP keeps changing. So it might hack in and use the same IP and you might get in. So DDoS attacks, always the best answer is WAF. Fourth option is guard duty. Again, the guard duty is same. It is just like your security guard, but at least the security guard will not allow the thief to come in or unauthorized people to come in. Guard will just say, hey, you know what, this unauthorized person has come. Now he is going to your home. Now you decide what to do. So you want something to prevent. That's why WAF is the right answer. Let's go to question number 2. Now this is the question. You may pause this video so that you can understand it better or read it better. Basically what the question is saying is, these are the keywords. You are moving some data from S3 bucket, EC2 and S3. This is your target, that is your source. This is the question. Now you want to reduce the overall cost. So in the exam, many questions you will see with cost, reduce the cost. The first option says EC2 instances in auto scaling group, will it reduce the cost? So in auto scaling group, what happens? This is auto scaling group. So instead of moving the data from here to here, now if it has to move here, it will not help, because you are increasing the data transfer cost. You have to decrease it. Option B suggests you place all EC2 instances in same AWS region. So this all EC2 instances in same AWS region, that is fine, but it can be in different data centers. So region is made up of data centers. One EC2 instance can be in this data center, another can be in this data center. So if I have all EC2 instances in one data center, each data center is a availability zone, suppose. If I have it in one availability zone, then that would be better, right? So let's see in the question, do we have other options? So it says in same AZ. So same AZ is better than same region. And here last one, it says in multiple AZs, and that too in private subnets. So if you have it in multiple AZs, it's the same as you have it in the same region. So you will have it in different data centers, one EC2 instance here, one there. So you still will have a data transfer cost between these two AZs or these two data centers. Hence D is not right, C is right. This is the final answer. C is the correct answer. Let's see question number 3. So this is question number 3. Pause the video so that you can read it properly. I'm not going to narrate this question. Let's look at the keywords. What is the question related to? It says there is a sporadic usage pattern. The company would want to move to AWS cloud and needs a cost-effective database platform. So this is what the question says. You have a website, you have a web server, you have MySQL database. You want to move this to AWS cloud. Let's look at the options. The first says Amazon DynamoDB. So DynamoDB is a NoSQL database. Here you have MySQL, which is a SQL database. Hence A is wrong. B says Amazon RDS for MySQL. This is good, but this is not cost effective, because what's happening is it's saying sporadic usage patterns. So this database will be provisioned full time, and it doesn't depend whether it's sporadic usage pattern or full usage pattern. It will be available full time. So you will have to pay for the compute since it is on full time. But the third option is MySQL compatible Aurora serverless. Serverless is always better in this case, because it is a sporadic usage pattern. There is a heavy usage at the beginning of month, moderate usage at start of each week, and unpredictable usage during the week. So serverless is better. Whenever there is a usage, the compute will be on. If not, it will shut off. Fourth says put put the database on EC2 instance. So it's like you have this database on EC2, but this will not solve the problem, because your EC2 will be up, your MySQL database will be up full time, and whenever the load is high, it will spawn, suppose, auto scaling group more EC2 instances, but your MySQL is always up, even if it is not used. So you are still paying for compute. Normally with serverless, what happens? It is a on-demand auto-scaling configuration. It starts and shuts down automatically. It scales up and scales down also automatically. And you don't have to manage any database capacity. If more capacity is needed, it will allocate. If more compute is needed, it will scale up. Hence, this is the right answer, option C. Let's look at the next question, which is question number 4. This is a question. Pause this video to read it properly. These are the keywords. So the question is basically saying your EC2 instance, it takes time, 1 minute to initiate the boot up. This is the problem statement, and you have to redesign this. First option says use NLB with slow start configuration. What is slow start configuration? So slow start configuration, suppose you have a load balancer here, and there is an auto scaling group, and the auto based on the high load, there are two new EC2 instances spawned by auto scaling group. So that EC2 instance, you can put a slow start. This target, you can make it slow start. That means immediately millions of records, millions of users requests will not be sent here. It will start slowly and gradually. That is slow start. Slow start is a feature of ALB, application load balancer. It is not a feature of NLB. What is mentioned in this option? NLB, network load balancer. Hence, this option is wrong. When you see the question, 1 minute to initiate boot up, etc., this is a scaling question, EC2 scaling question. This is not a caching question. So if you see options B and option D, these are two caching options. Elastic cache, usually you put it over the top of database so that frequently accessed SQLs can be cached and the load on database can be reduced. So option B is wrong. Option D, it's used for OTT platforms like Netflix, Amazon, etc. So that the content that you are viewing, you do not see a performance issue. It will be cached near to the user. So both options B and D are wrong, and A is also wrong. So we are left with only C. What the C does is instance warm-up condition. Now, instance warm-up condition, what it means is uh, when this auto scaling group new instance is made, the instance warm up expiry will be already done because it will be in the warm condition, so that the ALB, when it sends the request, it will be catered. There will be no wait time, and this is the right option. Hence, the final answer is option C. Let's see question number 5. This is the question. Pause the video to read it properly. This question is linked to EC2 over provisioning. That is a problem statement. Okay, and it has highly variable demand. Let's look at the options. The first is use auto scaling with reserved instances. See, reserved instances will not work here because reserved instances is like to save the cost. If you know that you have loads coming in between 9 to 2 p.m. So you can buy a reserve instance or a scheduled reserve instance, and that will reduce your cost. Here it will not help the over provisioning. Let's look at option B, schedule scaling policy. Schedule scaling policy is like, at a particular time, suppose you know that between 9 to 2 p.m. the load is pretty high, so you will set the scaling policy to schedule so that between 9 and 2 p.m. this there is a scale up. But here you see that question says it is a highly variable demand. You don't know. If you don't, it's a variable demand, you don't know the time, then you cannot use a schedule scaling policy. Fourth option says use suspend resume feature. So you can use suspend and later resume for these features like schedule scaling actions, dynamic scaling in, scaling out, etc. But again, this is, you don't know when to suspend and resume because it is a highly variable load. The question never says at what time the load is high. It is highly variable. So how will you suspend and resume? At what time you will do that? You don't know. So you have to use the target tracking scaling policy. What this scaling policy does is, based on your demands, it calculates the scaling adjustment, and the scaling policy adds or removes the capacity. It's simple. So it is very cost effective because if the demand is high, the policy will add capacity, demand is low, it will remove the capacity, and it uses CloudWatch alarms for triggering this. Hence, in this case, option D is the right answer. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting some more videos. Now let's look at question number 6. This is the question. I have also marked the answer here. The question basically says is, you want to move your on-premises data. There are 10 terabytes of data. You want to move from on-premises to cloud. That is the question. What to do? Okay. Here I have put direct connect. So what happens here is, these are the options. So you have been given 72 hours for this move. Now if you use FTP, FTP is the slowest. FTP you should never use. If you have 72 hours and want to move 10 terabytes and you just have 1 Gbps, this will not work. Second is Snowball. Snowball, what is Snowball? This is Snowball. You place the order. So it takes a week to order this. You place the order today, you will get it at least after a week. This device will be couriered to your premises. You connect your network, copy the data. The data copy may take 1 or 2 days, and then you have to send this back to AWS. So there is total amount of at least 10 days lost. So you cannot do it in 72 hours. That's why this option is wrong. Third option is, so now between C and D, both are right. Between C and D, either you use set up VPN or you set up direct connect. Both will help you with unencrypted channel. You can encrypt the data in both the things. But direct connect is better because VPN will go through internet. Direct connect will not go through internet. It will go through the private network of Amazon. That's why direct connect is better. Direct connect works with 1 Gbps to 10 Gbps internet speed. VPN, the max is 1.25 Gbps. So when you are if the max you are getting is 1.25 Gbps, then that's a problem, because some data would be bandwidth would be shared by other applications. So keeping that in mind, option D is correct. Now let's see question number 7. So you can pause this video, read the question properly. The key here is that at the beginning of every month you are generating the sales report. You have 20 EC2 instances and it needs to be running for 7 days and cannot be interrupted. So here if you choose this instance, if you choose this option A, reserved instances is good. Okay, if we scan the options, we see A and D. One is reserved, one is scheduled reserved. Can we use scheduled reserve? Do we know the time? Yes, we know the time. We know that at the beginning of every month, these instances run for 7 days. This time is fixed. So scheduled reserve instance will give me benefit. Reserve instances you can use for uninterrupted workload. So D is the answer here. But let's look at other options. One, since we are using scheduled reserve instance, so reserve instance is out of question because we are using a variant of a reserve instance. Spot block instances, why it is used? For workloads which can be interrupted, but here it is saying it cannot be interrupted. For uninterrupted workloads, spot block instances cannot be used, because the moment someone bids higher than you, spot block is just like bidding. You bid and get that instance. The moment someone else bids higher than you, that instance is taken away from you. So you use spot block only for some small development or research activities where workload interruption is still okay. C is on-demand instance. On-demand instance will not give you cost benefit here. It will work, but it will not give you cost benefit. Okay, because you are using it on demand and releasing it, but the cost of on demand, so scheduled reserve instance is at least 70% cheaper than on demand. So option D is the right answer. Let's look at question number 8. So you can pause this video and read the question properly. Basically the question says you want to move 750 terabytes from on-premises file system to S3 Glacier. How you can do it? Again, the question says cost effective. So first option, create a site-to-site VPN. The question clearly says you should avoid saturating branch office low bandwidth internet. Site-to-site will put a load on this bandwidth. So A is not the right answer. B says use 10 Snowball appliances, which is good. and put it into a Glacier vault. So you cannot move data directly into Glacier. You have to move it into first S3 and then set up lifecycle policies and transition to Glacier. So this option is wrong. Third, it says mount the network attached file system to S3. You cannot do this. This is not viable. In cloud, you have EFS that can be used, but you cannot mount this in-premises network attached without a file gateway. You cannot do it. If there was a file gateway option, then you could have thought about it. So C is wrong. D says use 10 snowball appliances, which is good. Move it to S3 bucket as a destination, which is good, and create a lifecycle policy to transition to Glacier. This is perfect. Hence, D is the right answer. Why? Because you from in-premises you have to bring it in S3. Only in the latest versions we see for archive data, whatever archive you are doing for archive purpose, and if you are putting it into Glacier Deep Archive, that you can straight away put without transitioning from S3. But in this case, this data you will it is not going into Deep Archive because the question doesn't say that, it is saying Glacier. So in this case, you have to transition through S3 only. That's why D is the right answer. Please subscribe to my channel if you are serious about passing this exam in a very short span of time. My channel will be a big booster for you. Let's go to question number 9. This is the question and I have marked the answer as well. Read the question properly. You can pause this video to read. So the question says you have a website, it is deployed on EZ, you have this on EC2 instance, and the user uploads the documents are stored in EBS volume, okay, and then you also have a replica in a different EZ2 and same thing. Now the problem is one user logs in, the ALB says go here into this EC2 instance, they upload the document here. When the next time they try to access it, the ALB decides, okay, you go here, and here when they are coming, they are seeing that they don't have that document. It's not consistent. Now how to resolve this issue? The first option says you copy the data so both EBS volumes contains all the documents. Not a feasible option. So what it means is there should be a bidirectional copy from here to here and from here to here every time. So when the bidirectional copy is done for the documents, how will you know? You have to set this up. This is not a very efficient way, because while that copy is being done and the copy takes time and this guy accesses it, they will still see that the document is not there. So this is not an efficient way. So second option says load balancer should direct the user to the server with the documents. Load balancer doesn't have any option of this logic stating. Even option D suggests that use load balancer to send requests to both servers, return each document from the correct server. Load balancer does not have any logic. It is just used for load balancing. It just sees you configure the target EC2 instances. So you configure this target and ALB will, based on the capacity, if this EC2 is more occupied in AC, it will send the request to this. If this is more occupied, it will send the request to this. This is the only work of load balancer. Option C, let's look at option C. It is saying that you move everything to EFS and let the user access it from EFS. So this is a diagram. What it says is whenever this user uploads a document here, this should get into EFS. Whenever through the website the user is trying to access, that means it's a read, not a write. Whenever they are reading it, the read should always happen from EFS. So from both these instances, both this EBS volume, data will be moved to EFS, and EFS will only be used for read access to this website. So the documents will never be out of sync. Okay. Now there will be some challenge, like if this copy from here to here becomes a bit slow, then that might be a challenge. But then this is still fine because there is no bidirectional copy needed, and this is the better option of this lot. Hence, C is the correct answer. Now let's go at question number 10. This is a question. Please pause my video to read it properly. The problem statement is the reads are causing high IO and it is affecting your write request. Simple. So what should you do to separate read request from write request? Whenever you see such question, whenever you see Aurora and such questions or DynamoDB or such questions, etc., remember, put a read replica. This problem cannot be solved through caching. So the first option says read through caching. So this is not a caching question because caching will not resolve it. So the second option says update the application to read from multi-AC standby instance. So always remember, multi-AC standby instance is for disaster recovery. It cannot be used as at the same time as parent. It is used if the parent goes down, then the standby will be used. It is a disaster recovery solution, not to be used as read replicas. You always have option C, create a read replica, modify the application to use appropriate endpoint. This is the right option, because you will create a read replica and you will tell the website that whenever you are firing reads, it should go to these read replicas. When you are putting writes, it should go to the primary database. Option D, it suggests that you create a second Aurora database and link it to the primary database. This is the wrong option. When you already have an option for option C, where you have a read replica, then why would you do and create a primary database? That is not needed. You already have an option to create a read replica. So option C is correct. Let's look at one more question. This is the last one for this video. Question number 11. This is the question. Please pause the video to read the question in length. So basically the problem statement is you want to give a solution which will avoid data loss. You have to protect. Let's look at the options. First option says enable versioning. This is correct. Versioning is correct, because if you have multiple versions available, even by accident, if you delete the file, so enabling will be a helpful thing. Second option says enable access logging. Access logging will only tell who accessed the S3 bucket. It will not help you with data loss. It will only tell that who deleted this file, but it will not protect it. Third is server-side encryption on S3 bucket. Server-side encryption will not help you with data loss. The file will be encrypted, but if someone accidentally deletes the file, it will still get deleted. Option D suggests configure an S3 lifecycle to transition objects to S3 Glacier. For example, you configure this lifecycle policy and move the data from S3 via some intermediate steps to Glacier. And the policy says move this data after every 180 days. So before 180 days, if you delete the file accidentally, it will get deleted. So it will not protect the data loss. Option E suggests MFA delete. So whenever you accidentally delete or you delete purposely, it will ask you for a multi-factor authentication code. If you enter the code, then only the delete will be executed. And suppose after 2 days you realize that this should not have been done, you can use the previous version to restore it. Hence options A and E are the right options. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll be uploading more videos which will help you pass the AWS Solution Architect exam. Going through these videos will elevate your chances of passing the exam.